Early this year, the national general contractor Swinerton launched its Timberland brand for mass timber delivery and project integration. Joining us today to discuss that launch and the future of mass timber in the built environment are Chris Evans, Timberlab's president, Erica Spiritos, its pre-construction manager, and Sam Dicke, its business development representative. Welcome to all of you.
Welcome.
Thanks, John, for having us.
Let's try to put this into some larger context. By 2025, mass timber is expected to account for only 1.4 billion of a $14 trillion global construction industry. And at its current rate of growth would account for only 0.5% of all urban buildings by 2050. What, in your estimation, needs to happen for mass timber to play a bigger role in design and construction?
I can start off with that, John, and
Okay.
I'd say the first thing is building great projects. And I think so far we've seen lots of great mass timber projects across the United States, across all markets. And I think just everybody gaining that familiarity and seeing the advantages of using timber, that's definitely step one. I'll let Erica take on the other things that we think need to happen for that as well.
Yeah, John, I would answer this question in two scales. I think there's a macro scale response and a microscale response. And that macro scale really speaks to the conversations that we're having globally around the kind of future that we want to build. And a lot of that conversation is amplified because of the pandemic and the year that we've all had, in the time that we've spent at home and with our families thinking about our lives and how we're living them, and what other challenges we might face in the near future, whether they be natural disasters or pandemics or the global climate change crisis. And mass timber feeds in really beautifully and timely to this climate change response. So I think on a macro scale, the trend is toward wanting to build more environmentally responsible buildings. We are seeing requests for proposals from developers and building owners and large corporations demanding carbon neutral or even carbon negative buildings. And mass timber is a big part of that. So this is the era that we're living in right now, and I think more and more we're going to see the demand start to increase out of a global sense of urgency for meeting the environmental crisis that we're in. And then on a micro scale, there are a lot of little things that need to happen in the mass timber industry to help it evolve and grow to the point where it could meet a significant portion of the construction demand in this country and across the world. Chris said building great projects. There's a fear factor for many developers and owners doing their first project and stepping into a mass timber building. Being able to tour one of those is a great way to help give someone peace of mind that they could also do it themselves. So I totally agree with Chris there. I think more suppliers need to enter the marketplace. We need standardization in the market. We need to educate the AEC community, architects, engineers, and contractors, to be able to elegantly, optimally design and build these structures. It's not just a different material that we're working with, but a totally different project delivery process. And so there's a learning curve, and we need to get to the point where we're not learning on every project and having to design a mass timber building in parallel with a concrete building or a steel building, because that's what we're doing on many of our projects, and still having to fight to prove that mass timber is the most advantageous way to go. So those are a couple ideas. Glad to share more, but
yeah, I just wanted to jump in too and kind of piggyback off of what Erica said. I think if you look at what's happened in Europe and in Canada as well, there have been specific policies that have been put in place by the public sector to encourage building with carbon neutral products such as timber. And I think that lessons could be learned here in the United States to incentivize carbon neutral building in the same way. So, some of those things could be adding additional height bonuses, or allowing off-street parking, or some of the things that could be incentivized for local developers to just push the needle a little bit further to just incentivize with timber construction. I think that would have a massive impact in pushing the industry forward here in the United States.
And that also is really important in giving developers comfort in knowing that they'll be able to get their mass timber building through the building department and to a code approval. Right now, I think there's a reluctance and a hesitation on behalf of developers to even go to the building department with a mass timber building for fear of how they will respond to that proposal. Even when the building is being designed to within the limits of the current code. And so that just speaks to the challenges that we're up against, and it's not uncommon that a jurisdiction might have had no experience with cross-laminated timber, even though it has been in the building code since 2015. And so I think there's still a learning curve our jurisdictions, and that conversation between jurisdictions and developers needs to flow freely so that developers feel comfortable bringing forward mass timber projects to the cities.
Right now, I didn't ask this question when the stuff that I sent you, but I'm just wondering, what's the capacity situation right now? Is it up to where, if there was a spurt in demand, could the industry meet it?
Chris, you want to answer that, or?
Sure. Yeah. I think definitely, if there's the industry has been adapting to a consistent growth of 16 to 20% per year of mass timber market growing, and the supply chain has adapted to that. More European suppliers have entered the marketplace. A lot more capacity has entered the U.S. and in Canadian markets. New manufacturers have opened in the past year, adding to that capacity, and they're not maxed out yet at double or triple shifts, for their plants. More manufacturers are coming online as well in the future. So I think the industry is scaling to be able to, provide that supply chain that's there. I think they're scaling appropriately with demand. I'm sure we'll get to places where there's a period of time where demand outpaces supply for a period of time and vice versa. But I think we're on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Well, your company is. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would also add that while we don't see issues supplying our projects, there is still an opportunity to increase regional supply or augment regional supply so that a project in the Southeast could be guaranteed supply from the Southeast using trees grown in that region, in that bioregion, and same for the Northeast and same for the Pacific Northwest. And I think that idea is really exciting, especially as people are so, committed to buying local food, buying local clothing, buying local, goods and services. I think mass timber is totally possible. It is totally possible that we could be buying our mass timber buildings locally. The supply chain is not there yet. There's still a lot of growth that needs to happen. Both new manufacturers need to come online, and existing manufacturers need to, expand their services and be able to meet the needs of the market, both in new products, but also services to help support the development of prefabricated buildings. And so that's another component to this whole equation. It's, there's a question about lumber supply and panel supply, but often that's not the bottleneck. The bottleneck in the mass timber supply chain is really in the value add services that translate the design documents into fabrication level information. And that's what we call virtual design and construction, or 3D modeling, or also called detailing. And then the other aspect of that is then taking the commodity beam or panel or column and turning it into a custom building component, utilizing that 3D model and doing all the custom cutting. Typically we do that with CNC machines, custom robotic, equipment, to do all of the milling required to turn that commodity into a geometrically precise building component, where it can be installed efficiently on site, and we can turn that construction process into one of an assembly. And that's where the bottleneck is right now. It's really in that 3D modeling phase and in that fabrication phase.
Okay. Swinerton has been one of the more aggressive AEC firms in this arena. Last year, you opened up your own fabrication plant in Portland. The launch of Timberlab is now you have a delivery system in place. Talk a little bit about the Timberlab's scope of services and how you're marketing them right now.
Great. I mean, John, I'll tell you a little bit about how we got here. And I think, in 2017, we were challenged with a project in Hillsboro, Oregon for the First Tech Federal Credit Union. At the time, that was the largest amount of CLT to be delivered on a commercial construction project in the US, a 5-story office building. It's super beautiful. And through that experience, what we saw was that there was a need for more turnkey supply install partners in the subcontracting community who really understood both how the building is built, all the systems, mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems in the building, and how the timber works. So from that project, we really launched our endeavor into the mass timber industry. We specialized as a subcontractor, and then Timberlab is just really the solidification of that business plan, that whole idea. We've launched, we've gained enough traction and enough success that we felt it was appropriate to launch a full new business unit that is a turnkey subcontractor that does fabrication, engineering, detailing services, down to installing the nuts, bolts, washers, and timber on site, and doing that, across the U.S. And I think it's fair to say in 50 states. We're currently looking at projects in Hawaii. We'll be installing projects in Maine this year, up and down the West Coast, throughout the Midwest and Southeast. So we're really looking at this as a whole footprint of the United States, and being able to leverage our Swinerton brand and our footprint regionally to be able to give good quality mass timber service in all markets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right now, the most complicated and challenging part of a mass timber project is designing optimally, so you're not using egregious amounts of wood fiber, making sure that the grid is designed to really optimize and minimize the amount of wood fiber, minimize the amount of steel hardware connections, and that takes experience. But then also making sure that the timber structure is being, as Chris described, designed in a way that is elegantly integrated with all of the other building services. And that takes a construction professional to be able to do that. So we've really focused on being that group that can help get projects built when that expertise has not really been available. And that allows the supply chain to grow in a way that not all manufacturers have to provide that service.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been working on projects where, many other manufacturers had shied away from the project, such as the Ascent Tall Timber Tower. We've been working on that project for 2.5 years, I think, at this point. And it's now under
Where is that located, Erica?
So this is the tallest timber building in the world in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 19 stories of mass timber, or 6 stories of concrete parking. So it's 25 stories total. Will be 284 feet in height. And this project would not have gotten built had it not been for all of the creativity and, for all the creative problem solving that I think our team helped bring to the table. And obviously it was a team effort. And I commend Newland Enterprises for their perseverance and for bringing the team together. But these are the projects that we really enjoy working on because they show the world what's possible with mass timber. On the other hand, we're working on a 8-story workforce housing project in Seattle with Susan Jones, and that project is being permitted under the new Type 4C construction. So it'll be 8 stories, 85 feet tall, and that is a model for how housing could be built in cities all across the country. So while that's not the tallest, it's a project that we're super excited about because of what it means for urban housing and the opportunity to do that in a way that has integrity and dignity and environmental responsibility.
Mhm.
Something else that I think is really cool is, like, we started using computer aided drafting, a long time ago. Started talking about BIM, building information modeling, and everybody was like, oh, we need to do BIM modeling. It's really important. But nobody really used it until you needed to use it to prefabricate elements. And I really think mass timber has allowed us to come in and really engage in building better. Like coming in, prefabricating our work so it clicks together, so it is less of an invasive process in the communities that we're building in, shorter time frames to build. We can build projects with mass timber 20% faster than conventional ways. And we can do that by having just information management, asking the questions earlier in the process, thinking about what we're going to build, pre-planning that, creating that digital twin model, and that vets out a lot of the design issues early in the process. So to me, that's really exciting. It's like we're now using technology that we've developed 20 years ago on our modeling capabilities. We're applying that in a very beneficial way, and we're getting results out of it by being more efficient at building quicker, and with less of a less impact on our local environments.
Aside from the projects that Erica alluded to, is there any other projects that you wanted to call out as being something that was, the special or interesting that you've tackled so far?
Sam, we'll let you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, John, one of the super exciting projects that we're working on right now is actually at the Portland International Airport. So we're currently in construction of a 9-acre, 400,000 square foot mass timber roof structure that's going to be built on top of the existing roof structure at the Portland International Airport. So it honestly is a construction marvel, but then on top of that, it just has so many components to this project, which make it just absolutely unique and exciting to be a part of. There's some super cool sustainability requirements for the project. The Port of Portland is really prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and prioritizing where the timber comes from. So I was actually just talking with our project manager, Jared Rafay, who's been working on this project for a number of years, yesterday about this. And he had a really great point that he said, during these massive escalations in timber prices, the port could have turned around and said, hey, we're going to pull this timber from somewhere else. We're going to find the cheapest supply that we possibly can and pull lumber for this to make this project just meet the budget. But they said, no, we want to continue to support the local economies in the Pacific Northwest within a 500-mile radius of the actual project site to support the rural economic development of communities that are impacted most by these lumber strikes or lumber price hikes. So I thought that was really cool that, we're just part of a project that is so in depth with the development of the community building components. But on top of that, there's some really cool features of this. We've got massive 80-foot glue lamp spans, the longest single span ever produced by one of our manufacturers we're working with, which is Zippo Laminators down in Eugene. We're using mass plywood as the roof structure. That comes out of a plant in Lyons, Oregon called Freris Lumber. They've actually taken the leap to create their entirely new mass timber product that hasn't been on the market before. They did testing in Europe and they studied CLT, and they've been a commodity plywood manufacturer for 60, 70 years, and they took the leap to actually create an entirely new project. And this is going to be one of the absolute showpieces for that project in terms of scale and size. So it's a really cool project to be a part of. I don't know if Chris or Erica, you want to talk about any of the other highlights of it, or Erica being a little bit more involved in the sustainability sourcing requirements, but it's super cool to be a part of this one.
Yeah, Sam, I think you really did it justice. The sustainability goals were to source wood 100% from the bioregion or within a 500-mile radius of the airport, as Sam mentioned, to source as much wood from small family landowners and tribal landowners. So we've got wood coming from multiple tribes in the Pacific Northwest, the Caulfield tribe and the Yakima reservation as well. And then also to support sustainable forest management through multiple certification systems, in this case FSC certification, but also to support small family landowners who maybe weren't able to do the certification but were still managing their lands to very rigorous standards in terms of maximum clear-cut size, protecting streams, providing wildlife habitat, avoiding the use of chemicals, things like that. So this is an incredible project, as Sam mentioned, in terms of the impact on the community and also what it says about the possibility of building a timber structure with this level of rigor in the supply. I mean, managing a supply chain that far upstream. So that's the forest, the sawmill, and then the lamination plant, and then the fabricator, Timberlab, was a really complex effort. And there is no infrastructure to do that kind of sourcing.
My last question is about where your company sees the greatest potential for the use of mass timber. I'm talking about what kind of typology you think is likely to be the most receptive, and what your company is going to need to do internally to meet the anticipated demand.
Yeah, great question. I think we can start off with saying that mass timber works really well with in office type projects, public civic type projects, education, classroom projects. And then it's really starting to enter the residential market. I think over time, we're going to see it hit the industrial market and, medical office building and some other markets. I think that the process here is relatively simple. Come back, build good projects, be successful with those, and then keep pushing the boundaries of what you can do with timber. And I think every day we get kind of challenged with a new type of project that hasn't had timber applied to it, where we learn how do we do this most effectively. Over the past year and a half, that's been residential. Like, how do we do this really effectively and efficiently in residential? I think, over time, mass timber will be, like Sam said, the preferred structural solution. And we did this activity where we looked at the map of AISC certified steel fabricators in the US. And if you put dots on a map, the map just turns into dots. They're everywhere. You can throw a football and probably hit a steel fabricator or shop, from any kind of city. They're littered, and the supply chain has had 100 years to be mature and 100 years to optimize how you use steel in a structure. Right now, we're at probably year 10 of how do you apply mass timber to structures in the US. And so we're standing really at the beginning of this journey of filling in that map of supply chain. And as we do that, costs will stay flat, costs will come down as we develop technologies to reliably use timber as a structural brace frame as part of a brace frame system. It'll start to be implemented in more parts of the building. We're starting to see it in architectural finishes and feature stair systems, not just the structural system. So we're at the beginning of this. I think your first question was really on point, is like, how does mass timber create more market share? And I think that's by having people that are curious, interested, having architects and developers and owners that are curious and interested, and taking that journey to apply it to one project at a time, and start to move the needle a little bit ahead. And pretty soon we'll see this in all markets as a affordable, cost-effective, sustainable solution. Yeah, that's the course we're on right now. And you know, I think we see it. We talked about all these fantastic big projects. There's another project, the Harder Mechanical project. That's a 2-story, 26,000 square foot office building out of mass timber, delivered 2 months faster than what the market could deliver it in, and with a high level of quality. We have a building owner there that's just ecstatic on the way that it's coming together, the fit and finish of it. And that's what I would call a very consumable job. Mass timber is not just for these epically big projects, these big airports, and these showcase publicly funded pieces. They're for the next person that's going to develop their corporate headquarters. That's a 25,000 square foot office building, not a 250,000 square foot office building. It's a very consumable, deployable method and system. And we're seeing that right now. We're seeing projects in small communities, not in Oregon, not in the lumber basket, but in the middle of North Carolina, in the middle of Iowa. You know, these places that you wouldn't think mass timber would permeate. That's what we're seeing over the past year, and that's probably the biggest change. Is we see smaller projects in middle America saying we want to be able to build better, build more sustainable, and we see mass timber as that path to be able to do that. And that to me, those small jobs are actually what I think is just really fantastic and cool, because that's the smaller architecture firms, the smaller building owners getting educated on how to do this successfully. And that's remarkable. And that's where I really see this like market share of mass timber starting to launch, is when you start to see those, not just those fantastic projects doing it, but those small local projects using it as the right solution.
Mm-hmm. Chris, Erica, and Sam, thanks for joining us today and giving us your thoughts about your launch. We wish you good luck moving forward.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, John.
Thanks a lot, John. We really appreciate it.
And this is John Caulfield from Building Design and Construction. Thanks for joining us.